The wind screamed across the plains that night, carrying snow and silence in equal measure, such sharpening his old hunting knife. The sound of steel on stone was the only heartbeat in that frozen world until he heard it. A faint knock, soft, desperate, barely there. At first, he thought it was just the wind howling at him again. But then he saw her, a small figure collapsed in the snow. Thomas hesitated for a heartbeat. Out here, helping the wrong person could mean war. Instinct took over. He laid her near the fire, stripping away the frost-bitten rags and wrapping her in his blanket. The flames cast trembling light across her bruised arms and face. Whoever she was, someone had hurt her badly. Thomas poured warm water into a tin cup and pressed it to her lips. "Easy now, little one. You're safe." Outside, the blizzard raged, howling like the ghosts of men he'd once fought beside. He knew the Comanche lands weren't far. He also knew that saving her might draw eyes he didn't want to meet. But something inside him, something human and long buried, wouldn't let him leave her to die. By dawn, the storm had quieted. The girl stirred, her eyes opening slowly, dark and frightened. When she saw him, she flinched back, clutching the blanket like a shield. Thomas raised his hands, voice low and gentle. "You're safe here. No one's gonna hurt you." She didn't answer, only looked toward the open door where the world outside lay covered in endless white. Thomas sighed, pouring himself coffee from the pot over the fire. "Guess we'll figure this out come morning," he muttered. He didn't yet know that the morning would bring more than sunlight. It would bring the thunder of hooves, the shadow of vengeance, and the test of every choice he had ever made. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low, and Thomas sat by it, his rifle resting against his knee. The girl still slept, her breathing steadier now. He didn't know her name, nor what nightmare had chased her into the storm. But something told him that trouble was following close behind. When she finally awoke, she watched him quietly, her eyes sharp yet filled with confusion. He smiled faintly and pushed a bowl of stew toward her. "Eat," he said softly. She hesitated, then lifted the spoon with trembling hands. Between mouthfuls, she spoke a few broken English words. "Name Naya." Thomas nodded. "Naya, good name." She pointed toward the south, where the plains stretched far beyond sight. "My people," she said. Thomas felt a chill run deeper than the winter air. Raiders, maybe whites, maybe renegades, had hit her camp. That meant survivors would be out there searching. He stood and walked to the door, looking out over the endless snow. His breath rose like smoke in the cold. He'd seen too many feuds between settlers and tribes. Each one ended the same way, blood for blood. If the Comanche found him with their girl, they wouldn't listen to reasons. All that day, he kept a watchful eye on the horizon. Naya sat near the fire, mending a torn piece of fabric, glancing at him now and then with cautious trust. As the wind eased, an uneasy peace settled between them. But near dusk, Thomas heard it, the distant echo of hooves. He stepped to the doorway and saw dark shapes moving in the snow, spreading out in a wide circle. Warriors. Naya froze, her face pale. "My father," she whispered. Thomas's stomach dropped. He looked back toward the plains, where more riders emerged from the blue twilight, feathers and rifles glinting. 70 warriors, at least, surrounding his small cabin like wolves closing in on a wounded deer. He checked his rifle, heart pounding, but he wasn't a fool. This wasn't a fight he could win. "Stay here," he told Naya, his voice low. "No matter what happens, don't move." The fire crackled softly as he stepped outside into the cold. Snow crunched under his boots. He raised his hands, the rifle hanging loosely at his side. The riders halted a short distance away. Thomas met his gaze across the frozen distance. He didn't need words to understand this was the girl's father. The wind had gone still, but the air was thick with tension. 70 warriors sat astride their horses, their dark silhouettes outlined against the pale snow. The tall man who had dismounted Naya's father stepped forward, his face carved with both rage and grief. The chief's voice broke the silence like a blade. "Why is my daughter in your house, white man?" His English was rough but strong. The words carried the weight of command, of a man who had led men through storms and battles. Thomas swallowed, his voice steady but cautious. "Found her in the snow, half dead. I gave her shelter. That's all." The warriors shifted in their saddles, eyes narrowing. One man spat into the snow, Another raised his bow slightly. Naya appeared in the doorway behind Thomas, clutching the blanket around her shoulders. "Father," she cried, her voice trembling. "He saved me." That stopped them. Every warrior's gaze turned toward her. The chief's expression softened just a little. He took a step closer, eyes flicking from his daughter's face to the cabin, then to Thomas. "You speak truth." Thomas nodded once. "If I meant her harm, she wouldn't be standing there." For a long moment, there was only silence, the kind that hangs between life and death. Then the chief turned and shouted something in Comanche. The warriors lowered their weapons, though their eyes still burned with distrust. Naya ran forward and threw her arms around her father's waist, sobbing words Thomas couldn't understand. The chief placed a hand on her head, then looked back at Thomas. "You took a risk, white man. Others would have left her for the cold." "I've buried enough children," Thomas said quietly. "Didn't want to add another. You have done a good thing. But the land remembers blood, and there are men who will not forget what you have seen tonight. Stay alert." Thomas exhaled, finally lowering his hands. Naya lingered for a moment, meeting Thomas's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Then she followed her father into the white distance. Thomas stood there long after they were gone, the cold biting at his skin, the firelight behind him flickering against the walls of his lonely cabin. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this wasn't the end. When a man crosses paths with destiny, it never leaves quietly. He looked out over the plains, the wind rising again, and whispered to himself, "Guess peace never lasts long out here." 3 days passed since the Comanche warriors had vanished into the horizon, but their presence still haunted the cabin like an echo that refused to fade. Thomas Grady moved through the silence with the same uneasy calm as a man waiting for a storm he knew would come. Every creak of the timber walls, every rustle of wind outside made his hand drift toward the rifle leaning near the hearth. He told himself he had done the right thing. Saving that girl was the only decent thing left in a world where decency had grown rare. But right choices didn't always bring peace out here. They usually brought trouble. One morning, Thomas noticed hoof prints near the creek, fresh, sharp, and too organized to belong to hunters or travelers. He crouched, touching the wet impressions, and his gut tightened. These weren't Comanche. These were army horses. By nightfall, he saw their campfires in the distance for riders, dressed in the blue coats of cavalry scouts. The frontier had taught Thomas one thing: the army didn't ride this far north unless they were looking for something or someone. The next day, the riders came. They weren't friendly. Their leader, a scar-faced lieutenant, sat high on his horse and called out, "We're looking for a Comanche girl taken from a raid 3 days back. You seen anything, mister?" "No girl here," he lied. His voice was even, practiced. "Ain't seen anyone since the snowstorm." The lieutenant's eyes narrowed. "Funny, we found small footprints leading from the hills toward your place." Thomas shrugged. Wind plays tricks with tracks. The soldier didn't smile. He looked past Thomas, toward the cabin, his fingers tapping the rifle slung across his chest. "We'll take a look inside." Thomas's heart thudded once, slow and heavy. He stepped aside, masking his tension behind a neutral expression. "Help yourself." They searched the cabin, turning over blankets and crates, but found nothing. The place smelled of smoke and pine resin, nothing more. When the lieutenant finally stepped back outside, he gave Thomas one last, long stare. "If you're hiding her, old man, you're standing between the U.S. Army and its orders. That's a bad place to stand." Thomas didn't answer. He just watched them ride away, snow crunching under iron horseshoes until the sound faded into the hills. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Because a mile east of the cabin, in an old root cellar hidden beneath fallen logs, Naya was waiting alive, frightened, and still depending on him. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline, spilling gold light across the cabin. Thomas sat on the porch, smoking quietly, the weight of his decision pressing heavy on his chest. Inside, the girl waited beneath the trapdoor, hidden among root baskets and old barrels. Every sound outside made her tense. Every silence felt like a storm about to break. "They'll come back," he said in a low voice. "Maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day. The army doesn't like to be lied to." Naya looked up at him, her eyes full of fear but also trust. "Why you help me?" she whispered. You're not one of my people." Thomas hesitated. The firelight flickered against the scars on his hands. "Once," he said slowly, "I had a family. A wife, a little girl about your age. A raiding party hit our wagon trail when we were moving west. Your people, maybe, or another tribe. Doesn't matter anymore. My girl didn't make it. But when I found you in that storm," he swallowed hard. "It felt like I was being given one more chance to do something right." She listened quietly, her small fingers gripping the blanket tighter. "Then I think Great Spirit send you," she said softly, "to fix what broken." Thomas gave a rough laugh, though it didn't reach his eyes. Maybe so. That night, neither of them slept much. The wind carried strange noises through the valley, echoes of men, horses, and the faint metallic clink of rifles. By dawn, Thomas's fears were confirmed. Dust rose from the southern trail. The soldiers were coming back, and this time there were more of them. He moved fast. "Naya," he whispered, "take the back path. Follow the creek until you see the big red cliff. Your father's people camp there sometimes. Go to them, don't stop. Don't look back." She shook her head, tears glimmering. "They kill you if they find you." Thomas smiled faintly, handing her his old compass. "Don't worry about me. I've been running from death a long time. Go." She hesitated only a moment before disappearing into the trees. He reloaded his rifle, stoked the fire, and sat down at the table. The hoofbeats grew louder, closer. The lieutenant dismounted, anger burning in his eyes. "Where is she?" Thomas looked past him toward the horizon. "Long gone," he said quietly. "And if you've got any sense of mercy left, you'll let her stay that way." The silence that followed felt endless. Then came the sound of a rifle being cocked,